It's Christmas in VR land.
Ooh.
For me.
Okay.
It's a holiday. It's a Christmas miracle.
Wait, your Windows mixed reality headset has gotten a stay of execution.
See, okay, not to make this cold open all quasi-religious, God giveth and taketh away VR, because that's a whole other can of worms. Microsoft is deprecating Windows mixed reality. I'm sure you know that. I don't know.
Yeah, we talked about it a couple weeks ago, I think. Months ago now, maybe.
Like, they were quite literally rendering Windows mixed reality headsets unusable in Windows 11 later this year as they remove all of the drivers and support. So, like, what am I going to do with that thing? Is it just e-waste?
Electronics recycling.
Is it literally just e-waste? That's terrible.
It wouldn't surprise me if somebody writes a driver, like pulls out the driver and writes a wrapper for Steam VR for it or something like that. That would make a lot of sense. Although also those headsets are there's a couple of relatively new headsets that are going to get EOL'd with that if you update Windows past a certain point.
Yeah, there are newer ones even than the one I have. That Monado, if you remember that, we talked about that on the FOSSPod ages ago. Like that has like very rudimentary mixed reality support, but I don't know that it'll ever get better. Like, it doesn't even support controllers yet.
Well, the bummer thing about it is that the mixed reality part goes, like, disabling the mixed reality part is also going to disable the Steam VR. Because their Steam VR implementation runs through mixed reality. So all those headsets are basically junk unless somebody does the work to update the driver to only use Steam VR, which sucks.
Yep, they can't do literally anything. But Sony has now started teasing that the PSVR 2 is probably going to get some kind of PC support, although I am tempering my expectations about what that's going to look like.
Well, like, given their success on PC with the simultaneous Steam releases of, or even delayed Steam releases of a lot of games, but like they released Helldivers 2, which I guess is a Sony published game, but not a Sony first. Is it? Yeah,
they
is it Sony first? Like Sony Studios is, I think, what they call that, right?
I can't. I'm not sure. On PC, I think it's got even its own publisher name on PC. But yeah, they don't own Arrowhead, I don't believe. So it is like a first party publishing deal or something. Anyway,
yeah. But the upshot is Sony loves the PC now. They're embracing the PC, and it makes a lot of sense.
By all appearances, Helldivers is doing way better on PC than it is. Not that it's doing poorly on PS5, but it just like it's blown up on PC in a way that has got to be catching the attention of all the executives over there. And anyway, the language is squishy enough. I'm expecting this to be like the worst possible version of this.
Yeah, I mean, the way they've described it, it could be anything from Sony first party games that have PSVR 2 plugins and implementations will work on the PC, but nothing else will, to they'll just make a full ass Steam VR driver for the PSVR 2.
Oh, give me that.
It wouldn't surprise me. I was playing with somebody last night who playing Helldivers with somebody, and I was like, hey, if you do the DualSense and turn off Steam input, you get the fancy triggers and stuff with the DualSense.
Ooh, I should try that.
It's real good. But when they plugged in their controller, Steam popped up with hey, you need to update the firmware on your controller. Now, when it used to do that, it would say you have to go to Sony's website and download this installer and do a bunch of nonsense. Now Steam just does it for you.
Whoa.
So Sony and Microsoft and Valve are like, I think they're buds. I think we got two faceless multinational corporations that are now friends.
I love it when my favorite corporations become besties.
Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
I'm Brad.
Hello.
Hi. Greetings.
I always we don't have a prepared intro for our podcast. Would people like this week on the Tech Pod, we're talking about questions.
I've said it before. Every time I say I'm Brad, I then panic and go, God, what do I say next?
Yeah, I've been commuting back and forth to PC World. I'm doing helping Adam with PC World while Gordon's out sick.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I'm commuting back and forth occasionally, which gives me time in the car to listen to more podcasts. I'm broadening my podcast horizons, and everybody has a different approach to this. So when I listen to a Rob Zacny joint, he's got like a whole like he sets up the whole thing in advance, and it's like, exactly what's coming, what to expect. But I mean, of course, there's still the unexpected in there. But anyway, it's we're doing a show this week. It's a questions episode.
Mm-hmm. It sure is, and an answers episode.
We turn Q's into A's here once a month at the end of the month. As always, if you would like to send a question into the podcast, you can send it to techpod@content.town. That's techpod@content.town. Or alternately, if you are one of our thousands of listeners who support the show, because this is a listener supported podcast, and you would like to support the show and like to join and get access to the Discord, so you can post questions in the fabled Q's Seeking A's channel, where you post your questions and they immediately disappear into the void. You can do that by going to patreon.com/techpod and joining the Discord, getting the patron exclusive episodes, all that stuff. We'll talk about that at the end of the show.
Yeah.
But as we typically do, I think we should start with the emails.
All right, let's dig into some emails here then.
They're electronic.
Here is a question from Nick. I'll be doing a down to the studs home renovation at some point, and I am wondering about your thoughts on built-in ceiling speakers. Built-in / ceiling speakers, he says. I think there are two scenarios here. Part of the home will be a newer kitchen with a dining area on the side. I was looking at ceiling speakers for this area, but the spousal acceptance factor is low on this. The biggest gripe is the inability to control the volume or turn off the source with buttons if one of us is airplaying something. Any ideas on that? I run Habitat in my home if this helps. For distribution, should I be looking at Sonos amps, some obscure network player I've seen online, or a second zone feed off of an AV receiver? I had an experienced AV guy come in who apparently rubbed shoulders with speaker company execs who had a few suggestions, but I think we may have appeared too poor for him to take the job.
So every fancy AV guy has rubbed shoulders with the speaker company execs.
Think so?
Yeah, that's the stock in trade. Every time I go to somebody's house and they're like, "Hey, check out my AV system," the guy knows the guy who does this. I'm like, "Oh yeah, okay, good job."
It's probably a small community. I bet speaker companies are maybe not as big as you, like in terms of head count as you think.
Oh, like absolutely. When you go to the speaker, it's like when you go to CES, you don't meet Mr. Panasonic or Mr. Sony, but when you go to NAB and you're in the places where the speaker conferences and stuff like that, you'll yes, the people who make the custom speakers and stuff will be there.
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm going to recommend this, but I actually really like Sonos for what you want to do. They're expensive. They're way cheaper than a custom installed system that's going to pipe in off of your AV receiver, and they're way cheaper than getting a multi-zone AV receiver, and also doing all the wiring to get the wires from running wires from analog wires from one part of your house to another part of your house is going to be fraught with peril, because every time you cross power or data, it's going to add noise, and it's going to be problematic. That's why you used to have to get an experienced AV guy with this. With Sonos, you bypass all that by using either Wi-Fi or Ethernet. I would just do Ethernet drops to wherever you want to put the Sonos amps, Ethernet and power. You might even be able to do power over Ethernet with a splitter on the Sonos amps now. I can't remember if the power over Ethernet's. I can't remember how much power the Sonos amps draw. But you can. The neat thing about Sonos is you can put an iPad or an old Android tablet or something in kiosk mode, run the Sonos app on that, and just have it be the only thing that launches when you turn on that iPad or that tablet. And that gives you the button control. Because Sonos, the thing Sonos does that I really love is they have native AirPlay support, but you still have control over the streams when you're AirPlaying with any of the controllers that are hooked to the system. So
I wonder if there are provisions for wall mounting iPads. I mean, there must be. I mean, you could just build your own frame, I guess. You'd have to deal with running some kind of power and trying to hide that if you wanted it to look tidy. But you could, if you're doing the kiosk iPad, like you mentioned, you could make it part of the wall and just kind of permanently install it.
Yeah, I think you could do that. I think the thing I would do is probably put it on find a stand that you can hang on the wall so you can pull it off and on when you need it. But
sure.
but yeah, there's a bunch of solutions for that kind of stuff. The thing about Sonos, so Sonos had problems a couple years ago because they removed support for some older, just to be clear, 10-year-old devices.
Yeah, but still,
they're speakers, so they shouldn't remove support for 10-year-old speakers.
That's the thing. Like speakers of anything in technology, speakers should last more than just about anything else. Like good speakers just last.
they ended up making good on it. Like they left the old, they basically continued supporting the old version of the app. The reason I think they dropped it is because it didn't have the right Wi-Fi hardware or something in there to do the newer, to do what they needed to do.
Yeah.
But the apps should be relatively bulletproof, especially if you wire them in with Ethernet instead of doing Wi-Fi.
Yeah, it's fun. I have a couple of Sonos products, to be clear, a couple of the higher end speakers. It's been years since I did it. I didn't love the onboarding, like going through, like they have the very handholdy, like, you know, click next and answer this question and then click next and do like the really black box style of setup where if something goes wrong with your network setup or whatever, there's no insight into why it's not working.
Yeah.
You just get a generic, like something went wrong. Like that stuff is incredibly frustrating. I finally got it on there. The other thing is, it's funny if you dig into like the hardcore Sonos community, like people like packet sniffed the traffic going in and out of those things to see what they're doing and stuff. And like, I think even the newer ones run, for example, they run SMB1, the sharing protocol, which is extremely insecure. Like it's like SMB1 is like one of those, like, do not run this on your network type thing. So there are people now who will use like Raspberry Pis to proxy like SMB3 to SMB1 traffic just to quarantine that stuff.
Well, and just to be clear, I think most of the people who are doing music streaming with Sonos now probably aren't streaming collections from their like NASs or whatever. I think they're probably connecting Spotify or Apple Music and stuff like that.
Most people are. I mean, I might be streaming from my NAS, but
you might be streaming. I know you're streaming from your NAS, but even I don't stream music from my NAS anymore.
The other concern about the Sonos stuff, and like you kind of just outlined this, is like eventually, like what happens if Sonos just goes away? Like you need that app. You have to go through their onboarding literally to even get the thing on your network.
Yeah, Sonos is a pretty big company at this point. They employ like 2,000 people or something. It's substantial.
But you say that about it, like, I mean, everybody says that about everything right up until it stops being true. You know?
I mean,
it's
Vice
like
was a 2,000 person company a month ago.
Sony, right? Or I mean, the most egregious example recently is like Sony and its subsidiaries, Crunchyroll, and God, what was the other? Was it Funimation?
Oh, when they pulled content from the services,
they have been pulling licenses for things people paid money for and quote unquote owned in digital form, and people literally just cannot watch their purchases anymore. And like that's another example of the type of thing where you're like, oh, those are huge companies, like those will never go away, right? And then all of a sudden they do, and that sucks. But I have like checked in occasionally on the efforts to break the encryption on the Sonos stuff and try to open it up so that in the event that stuff, all the software end of it disappeared, you could still use them as like basic speakers at least. But there has not been a lot of progress there.
On the installed ceiling speakers, I love those for areas where you don't want to have speakers on the shelves.
Yeah.
Like if you have the space to do it in your ceiling, the ceiling speakers in the kitchen is one of the things I would love to do. We just because of the way my house works, the ducting all goes over the kitchen or it's too close to the edge to get up there. But I would absolutely do that. I also would probably do in-wall speakers if you're doing like a home theater room. In-wall speakers, especially for like rear channels and side channels and back channels and all that stuff in like a modern 7.1 home theater setup seem like a pretty good compromise between having a room full of speakers and having something that is like sounds nice and gives you surround sound. They're more expensive. You're paying a premium for that. But I think ultimately, if you care about not having a bunch of giant speakers around your house or even a bunch of small speakers around your house, it's worth spending the money on.
I've said it before. There's nothing I love more than hidden technology.
So the other wild card option on this is just to put HomePods everywhere. HomePod minis. They don't work super well with Spotify. You have to like choose to AirPlay to them. They work great with Apple Music, unsurprisingly. And you can, hey Siri, everything you want to them and from them relatively easily. And the sound quality is shockingly good. If you put one big one in a big room and little ones in little rooms, then they work quite well. And they give you control over your home automation stuff as well, which is nice. The downside is that they look like little orange and yellow and white balls all over your house. So, you see them.
What do those things look? They must have rolled out a new model that I'm
well, so there's the big one that looks like the garbage can Mac.
Yes, that's the one I was thinking of.
And then there's the little ones that are like round, like spheres with the tops cut off, kind of.
If you get the white or black one, that would probably fade into your decor pretty well. Just maybe don't get the orange or yellow one if you don't want.
The one thing I will say about the Home Assistant, I don't use Habitat, but I do use Home Assistant, and the Home Assistant implementation for for HomeKit for the integration with HomePods is so much better than the Alexa or Google implementations because it runs locally. So the HomePod can do the voice recognition stuff on board, and it doesn't go back to the connection is from the HomePod to the Home Assistant in the house. So it's like 200 milliseconds faster than Google Home or an Alexa turn on the lights command.
Cool. Very good. All right. Let's move on to this email from Ivan. The topic of 90s era first-person shooter binds came up a couple times in the past few episodes, and I wanted to comment. Like Brad, this blew my mind. I did not remember this. Like Brad, I also used right-click to move forward for the longest time. It wasn't until 2004 or so, when games were getting more and more of a pain to bind to that configuration, that I eventually adopted WASD. Also, I think there was a debate about the pronunciation of WASD when
WASD is how you say it. That's there's no debate. That's you Kazammed that.
Right. I get the objection. It sounds goofy, but also it's way easier to say.
I mean, it's not like you're saying ESDEF or something like that.
Yeah. I suspect Brad's use of it was probably influenced the same way mine was Quake. By default, Quake bound right click to forward. I super don't remember that, but apparently I guess that's where I got that. And people treated me like it was crazy.
I did not remember that at all, for what it's worth.
So I mostly stuck to Quake's defaults with some tweaks. Space for jump, comma, and period for strafing were default. So that's where my pinky, middle, and index fingers were. Right control defaulted to fire, but left click did that, so I changed it to back movement and used my thumb for that. Interesting.
So this was the default Quake binds are weird. Romero talked about that in his book a little bit.
I was on. Yes, they are. Well, they were figuring it out. There was no standard at all. They were literally just making up binds out of thin air. I used left control for back, shift for jump. No, shift for run, or I can't remember actually. Shift was run, I believe.
So I used the arrow keys for movement and left alt for strafe, space for jump,
interesting,
control for shoot for a long, and shift for run for a long time.
And then this is an interesting factoid. I had seen this pop up elsewhere as well. As for WASD, that was an innovation by 90s pro Quake player Dennis Fong, also known as Thresh, the guy who won Carmack's Ferrari in that Quake tournament. Those were the binds he used in those days. They then gained popularity and became the default by Quake 3, and the rest is history.
I remain bummed that I didn't go watch that Quake tournament. I was at that E3.
Did you have a chance?
Well, it was just at E3 on the floor of the show or something, right?
That's right, it was. Do you remember what year that was?
96, I think.
96. Oh, that was the last E3 I didn't go to.
Yeah, I still lived in Tennessee then, and it was in Atlanta. So I was I was writing, I scammed a press pass basically. So, yeah, those were the days.
Yep. All right, one more email from Autumn. Do you think people could design a battle pass, but for people using their cars in real life? What would even be on it? How much do you think the premium track would cost?
You think it's like playing certain music? You gotta you think there's a fuser component to this?
God, there's a bajillion things about a car you could gamify.
Yeah. Think about like your mileage. You're keeping your mileage below a certain point for X number of miles, your miles per gallon or miles per kilowatt hour.
Yeah, they could probably do some kind of like computer vision image recognition on the reverse camera and like rate your parallel parking ability.
My car has a top down camera, so I can one spot. Mm-hmm. It's like a perfect 5-point turn. No do-overs.
Yes, like just execute a perfect 5-point turn like that. That is an achievement right there.
What about like a low deceleration stops? Like you do X number of low deceleration stops, so it's like a perfectly gentle braking to a stop at or never run through a stop sign, or maybe always run through a stop sign. I don't know. Maybe the car companies are chaotic evil. What about what are the rewards though? Do you get to like turn on the air conditioning if you do a certain number of things?
God, that's grim. That is dark, but also we're in this era of cars charging subscription fees and like having DRM and stuff now, so it's completely believable.
You think you get a sick car skin? Like you get an LCD on the outside of your car and you can change it to to look like a banana?
How far off do you think we are from? Well, we talked about this, right? It doesn't. I started to say
there was a CES demo,
right? Like side panels that have some kind of built-in image display capability. That you
polychromatic paint is the thing. Yeah,
you can display graphics on your car that move and animate.
Yeah.
That's coming, I guess.
I just want a car that looks exactly like what's on the other side of the car from whatever your perspective is. So it looks invisible to other drivers.
Yeah.
Nothing could possibly go wrong with that.
Yeah. That's an example of what I guess I think of this as sort of like future tech that satisfies the Back to the Future 2 rule of, does this look futuristic in the sense that, or in the way that you watched that movie and thought, wow, that looks futuristic. Like that's the type of thing I would expect to see in a movie like that.
It's interesting because like we talk about this and like I didn't really buy the video pass through stuff because I've used it on the Quest 3 a little bit and it's not great. I mean, it's fine, but it's not perfect there. The Apple Vision Pro video pass through is really good to the point that I could see, like, if you have a car with cameras on all sides, you could potentially get a composited version of your surroundings.
What?
And do like third person driving.
That sounds like it would be really cool right up until it failed.
Well, I mean, yeah, look, and also you don't want to be wearing a giant piece of glass and metal on your face when your airbag goes off, right? So
you definitely don't want that, but also like any even split second disruption of your perception of your surroundings while you are operating a heavy machine at high speed.
Yeah,
not great.
Yeah, the circle of doom on the Apple Vision Pro would be real bad if you're going 70 miles an hour on the freeway.
Yeah.
Anyway. Please no battle passes for cars. That's my request.
No. Yes, hopefully not. All right, let's move to some Discord questions. Here's one from Peters Victor, who is a returning emailer. They're the one with the sheep shed.
Oh, man, I love a good sheep shed story.
Yeah. Sheep shed update. Hi again, and thanks for the previous answer. To answer Brad's question, yes, there are actual sheep involved, and Will guessed the use case for the camera spot on. Our ewes are set to lamb in April, and it would be great to be able to check on them from bed instead of going out to the shed once an hour to see if a ewe is about to lamb. I ordered a couple of Ubiquiti Nano stations, but haven't ordered a camera yet. Any suggestions? Are there any good HomeKit compatible models?
So there's a ton of the camera space is super competitive. There's a bazillion cameras on the market. Everything from stuff that's cloud connected and has a little bit of latency all the way down to something you can just plug in and like will connect with Home Assistant or your HomeKit install or whatever. Honestly, buy some stuff from places that you can return it and see what works. Because the thing that I've found with those cameras, the hardest thing about those cameras is getting the right mount for the area that you have. Because if the camera, usually they're weather sealed enclosures for outdoor cameras, even barn cameras, you probably want a weather sealed enclosures because it's wet and cold and all that stuff. The articulation inside the weather seal is the thing that's probably going to determine what works for you. 4K, you can get 4K, but the camera sensors are often noisy. But like you're probably looking at like in the US, it would be like $100 at most for a decent 4K camera. When I set up the Bird Nest Cam last year, I went and bought an Amcrest. An Amcrest camera that would connect to my Home Assistant, so I didn't have to send it to the web. It worked. It works great, like shockingly well. But again, the challenge with it is getting in the mount in the place that it needed to be, and yada yada.
Yeah, that stuff seems to be getting insanely like. I assume we're just fully in the territory of like absurdly cheap cameras on AliExpress that you can get like some kind of raw. What is the protocol? I think a lot of them use RTSP to spit out.
Yeah, they use RTSP or the new thing. Some of them do both.
What's the new thing?
What do you use on what's the thing on Twitch? That transport. There's a suction. I can't remember the name of the protocols.
There's a bunch of them now.
Yeah,
like there's HLS, there's Dash, there's SRT, there's Wrist. I've been living in video streaming world of hardcore for a few weeks. Anyway.
So the other thing about this is, since you're presumably not going to have the lights on in the barn so that the animals can sleep, you'll want to make sure that you like the reason to buy something that you can send back if it doesn't work right is because the infrared cameras have wildly varying qualities in my experience. I got 3 cameras before I found one that would let me see the birds at night.
Interesting.
And you'll want to like, nobody does reviews of these things that are worth a shit. So, and the proliferation of AI generated reviews is so bad. Casey Johnston, former guest of the show, was talking about this week. Like People Magazine is doing, every mainstream publisher, somebody is selling services to mainstream publishers that says hey, we will generate high keyword volume reviews so that you can draft on your good search juice and make a whole bunch of affiliate money by selling shitty overpriced air filters to people on affiliate links to Amazon. And so like if you search for best air filter for pets, you get home Real Simple and People and Better Homes and Gardens and Time and Newsweek. And all of these sites just have ghost pages that aren't linked off their CMSs really. So you can't use those kind of reviews anymore. You got to go to like Wirecutter or someplace or Consumer Reports or someplace that actually does product coverage for that kind of review. Yeah. And none of those sites cover these kinds of cameras because they're a like weirdo niche for people like us or people who install them professionally and just buy the same kind every time.
I need to just buy a camera or two. These things are $20 to $30 now. Like you can like here's a Wise camera that's 1080p Wi-Fi enabled for $19.99. Like so I need to just play with some of these.
The Wise stuff goes to the web. So
okay. So yeah, I would want to find the one that is like fully offline and not cloud connected.
Yeah. So the Amcrest is the low end. Like when I got 4 cameras, the 2 that I liked were Amcrest ones. I kept one of the Amcrest ones. There's a big jump from like the $20 or $30 cameras to the $80 or $100 cameras.
Yeah, I'm sure. I have no actual use for one of these things. I just want to get one and play with it.
Put it on the Pigs.
I've thought about. I work in this room. Like I kind of don't want a camera running in my house all the time.
I mean, I get it, but
it goes public.
Put it out on the street. Let people see the. Well, that's a bad idea. Then you dox yourself. But anyway.
I could mount it out back. We have hawks that hang out behind our house frequently. Maybe I could mount it out there and like
Hawkwatch 2024.
Point it at the big pole that the hawks like to perch on.
I like that.
I ever told you about the time that we encountered a hawk fighting some crows midair?
It's terrifying. It's awful. Crazy.
The
crows are terrible to them.
Yeah, totally. I had no idea that crows and hawks were like natural adversaries.
Yeah, I was driving with the kiddo and scarred her for life one day because I was like, oh, look, there's a hawk and some crows fighting. And then the crows downed the hawk and it was not good.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was like 4 of them just really wailing on it.
I may have mentioned this before. We were at the park one time and this is grim. A dead, partially chewed rodent landed on the path in front of us.
Oh, no.
And only then did we look up and realize that a hawk and some crows were going at it, and the hawk must have dropped its prey. Like it was extremely bizarre.
Did when we were in DC last year, we were walking through the garden behind the Smithsonian. I might have told the story in the podcast. If I did, I apologize. But we were walking through the garden behind the Smithsonian Castle from our hotel to the mall. And I was like, oh, look, there's a hawk and a falcon in the middle of this grassy spot, this big grassy spot. It's really cool. And then a squirrel jumped up from where the hawk was and it grabbed it and started ripping pieces of it off. And I was like, no, don't look. This is bad. Don't look at this. It was, circle of life, man.
Good old nature, red in tooth and claw.
Yeah, exactly.
Question from Jerry. What's your website bookmarking workflow? The star button next to the browser URL bar? Something like raindrop.io? Pasting links into a notes page? What is raindrop.io?
I'm going to look at raindrop.io right now. I meant to look at it.
Out.
So I, at this point, if I need to keep bookmarks, if I'm doing a project that requires that I keep bookmarks, I save them in a Notion. Like I make a page for the project and I save the links in a Notion document
as text links. Like, does it have facility for keeping like organizing bookmarks, or you're just pasting
you can
links
make a link, but I just make I put what it is and then a hyphen and then the link. And that way I have a searchable database of like, hey, here's the setup guide for blah, 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 whatever service I'm setting up on my NAS or on my server or something.
Yeah. It's funny, like bookmarks were huge at the beginning of the web, like straight up Netscape Navigator era.
Yeah.
Favorites in Internet Explorer 3, et cetera, et cetera.
Remember and then delicious?
Vaguely. But I kind of gave up bookmarks for years and years, like starting, I don't know, early 2000s maybe. Like I think actually it was around the time of the Firefox. What did they call it? Was Firefox the one with the awesome bar? Is that what they called it?
I don't know if they called it the awesome bar, but like I
feel like I remember that name and thinking it was awful.
Well, okay, so pinned.
Yes, it is. I'm looking it up on the Mozilla Wiki. Awesome bar v2. Anyway, that was the thing that would it would remember not just the literal text of the URL, but it would remember page titles and other metadata around the page, and you can kind of just type into the address bar something about the thing you had visited, and it would just find it. And that was about the point that I stopped using bookmarks.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, I have re-embraced bookmarks in the last like 4 or 5 years in a big way. I just bookmark things in Chrome though, and just let Chrome sync them across devices. And I'm not sure that I love I'm sure there's data collection going on there, and I wouldn't mind transitioning to something else, but I don't know.
I have a bunch of links to the Will Smith stories about me from the Oscars a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the last bookmarks I made, it looks like.
Oh wow, I bookmark stuff constantly these days. Like anytime I find like a Stack Exchange thing that I might refer to later or something like that, I bookmark. I mean, I have to gather news stories for the Next Lander podcast every week. Like I use it for that. Bookmarks are useful. I wouldn't mind maybe finding a way to decouple them from an account where a lot of data is probably being harvested from that, but I don't know.
Are they searchable in Chrome?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's like they're very flexible, easy to use, robust, etc.
Yeah, it's funny. The Firefox ones are searchable too. I don't really use them. I use the bookmarks bar for the things that I use often enough that I want to have them ready and accessible, but not pinned.
Yeah,
like I have a bookmarklet that saves a recipe to paprika and stuff like that there. But for the most part, I don't really use bookmarks anymore. But I also have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 tabs pinned open right now. So
that's a lot of tabs.
It's too many tabs, Brad.
Don't run so many tabs. Like whenever I look at memory usage, I have 64 gig in this new machine. Like it's not a problem. But anytime I look at memory usage, it's Chrome. Like of all the things using memory, it is like when the WSL2 uses kind of a lot, but it's mostly Chrome.
That's why I stopped using Chrome. Yeah. Honestly,
well, I think that's every browser though, right? Like browsers just tabs use a lot of memory when you use a lot of tabs.
So Chrome has 3 tabs open. Firefox has like 25. They're using the same amount of memory.
All right. Well,
yeah,
whatever.
Yeah.
I just stick to Chrome for compatibility reasons. Like we use too many like web-based video calls and chat things and stuff, and Chrome, everything is tested against Chrome.
Yeah, you have to use Chrome for like Google, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
What else we got?
Let's see here. Cat will mew. I regularly see stories about hacks where they say they're sponsored by a nation state. I'm curious, how do they know this, and why isn't that sort of thing a bigger deal if another nation is intentionally attacking our IT infrastructure? I don't have a ready answer for how they know. But I will say why it isn't a bigger deal is that we are assuredly doing the same thing to them.
Well, but I mean, that's never stopped us from disproportionate responses in the past as a country.
Fair. That is fair. But I mean, I think it's kind of like espionage, though, right? Where like everybody is spying on everybody all the time, even ostensible allies. And
I think that's true.
And like with something like that, they have your secrets just as much as you have their secrets, and you don't necessarily want those getting out.
I also think a lot of times it's, I have no idea why it isn't a bigger deal. How we know that they're sponsored by a nation state is, I think, an espionage thing, right? So we know, like we track money through, we track money through the international banking system and see that these people are being paid by this shell company, by this shell company, by this shell company, by this shell company. And then eventually you realize it's coming from Russia or Iran or whatever.
Yeah. There might be like digital networking footprints as well that can be followed and stuff. I mean, like a lot of this is probably just counterintelligence. Like you see it make the news occasionally, like hacker groups that are affiliated with certain countries, like have names and get news stories written about them because they've been identified and stuff, right?
Yeah, I mostly wanted to answer this because I'm curious if I think there are people probably in our listener base who do this kind of work. Yeah. And I'd be curious to have follow-up answers if you can do it in a way that won't get you in trouble with the man.
Yes. Or marked.
Yeah. Don't put us on a list. That's all I'm saying.
Yes. We shouldn't have taken this question.
Can't even ask these kinds of questions.
Here is a good question from Warbird.
Oh, really? No, I don't think Lane Kiffin is the best coach of all time, Warbird.
Okay, well, moving on then. No, it's actually, I'm torn on this one.
Okay.
Is there a point to the modern Raspberry Pi in this day and age?
Huh.
It really seems like anything beyond a Pi 3, which had the first 64-bit CPU in a Pi, is just paying more for a less performant solution with the added bonus of getting to play the wait for the SD card failure game. There's still a good entry point due to standardization and community support, but dropping the amount of money needed for the later models to just work, including dongles, cases, the increasingly specific power supplies, etc., makes that a losing proposition. For the purposes of this argument, let's leave the compute module line of products off to the side. Before we get into this, I'm going to interpret where he says the just paying more for a less performant solution. I assume he's comparing to other different solutions out there that are not Pis and not to previous Pis, because Pis from 3 to 4 to 5, like they have gotten
dramatically faster, right?
Probably more performant out of proportion to any increases in price. And in fact, the price increases have only been about RAM, I believe. Like doesn't the baseline 2 gig model still run at 35 even for a Pi 5?
I think the Pi 5 is more expensive.
Did they raise the price? They raised prices temporarily during the pandemic due to component shortages.
So the 4 gig model is $60. There is no 2 gig Pi 5, I don't think.
Okay. I did not realize that.
I'm looking at Wikipedia as my source on this.
Okay, he's right that they are getting more expensive at the baseline, even setting the extra accessories aside. And then he's also right, like they need active cooling now. I think the 3, you could run a 4 without active cooling, but it was not advised. And I think the 5 straight up has to have a fan, if I'm not mistaken. So like the component requirements are greater.
But they are not. They also are not discontinuing the older models. Like I think they're still manufacturing the 3.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think they still make the 1. I think they make all of them still, right?
I feel like when we talked to Eben, he said that, but I can't remember.
Yeah.
The point is now there's a wide range. Like for example, my Pi-hole runs on a 3. It's fine. It'll continue running there until the hardware dies, which hopefully will be never. I had a spare cooler, so I stuck it on the CPU just to give it a little more life.
Yeah, my Pi-hole is a Pi 2, and it's also perfectly performant for that. I think the main thing here is the rise of these cheap x86 little embedded PCs.
Yeah, like when you get into a Pi, for example, when I was buying a CM for my Home Assistant and I paid $100 for it because I got the one with the 16 gigs eMMC thing on it and a whole buttload of RAM, so I could run a bunch of Docker containers there, no problem. That cost as much as the B-Link that runs Plex, right? It was like $80 or $90. And
my gosh,
the B-Link was like $110. This was also pandemic time, so it was like prices were a little inflated.
I did not realize your B-Link was that cheap. I thought those types of little x86 boxes were like $200 to start.
If I recall, I bought it on sale, but it was I think I bought the N5105 one.
Okay.
And it was $120 maybe at most when I bought it.
Okay. Yeah, if you can get something like that, especially these Alder Lake N100 x86 boxes, that has come out, like those things are stupid performant for the price and the power profile. If you're getting into territory where it's $100 plus for your Pi setup, then maybe it does make more sense to get one of those, even if they're a little bit more. Like if it was a $200 differential or something, I would say like the Pi is still worth it. But
So the exception is that a lot of the Raspberry Pi application, like a lot of people use Raspberry Pis for like application in a box, app server in a box, right? Yeah. So for example, Pi-hole you can run on a bunch of other things, but it takes a little bit of specialized knowledge to get it up and running on something that's not a Pi. Whereas when you download and install the Pi installer, it just says, hey, do you want to install Pi-hole on this? And you hit the button and it's done. And then you follow a like 5-question setup process. So it's I think there's a real argument in favor of, hey, this is a single use low power computer that you don't have to think about too much.
Yeah. Yeah. Also lower power than, like, that's another point. I mean, even the little x86 things are getting pretty low, but yeah. And actually, I don't know how high the Pi 5's power draw is. Like back in the day, a Pi idled at like 1.5 watts or nothing. Like I think they would hit like maybe 5 to 7 watts at load or something. I think the newer ones definitely pull more, but I think a Pi is definitely still, for something you run 24/7, is still going to use less power than even something that pulls like 30 watts or something, if that matters to you.
The other big thing that's changed on the 4 and the 5 is I think that you can get higher speed data off of the headers now.
Yes, I can't
It's not
remember.
just I2I anymore.
I think there's I think they are exposing PCI Express to some degree on the 5. I forget how exactly.
Yeah, so there are uses for it. It's I think it's this is a place where weirdly you don't want to buy more Pi than you need. Because you buy too much, you're not going to use it. It's just going to take power that you don't need.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put up the Pi hole on a 5. No. I think the 4 however, a Home Assistant install, especially if you have a whole bunch of different kinds of devices that are running a bazillion different Docker containers or community store items, probably could benefit from the extra RAM and the bigger CPU on a 4 or 5. I'd say don't get a Pi 5 just to run a Pi hole, but if you're willing to get in the weeds and containerize things and you wanted to run a Pi hole and some other stuff on there, then it makes more sense. Yeah, and then the other thing is for end user devices, obviously we're not talking about installed kind of embedded devices, and because the weird thing is a lot of people use Pis now for manufacturing stuff.
Right.
When we did the FOSSPOD with Eben, he said he looks at the industrial devices and sees the port footprint for a Raspberry Pi on the devices where a lot of people just use them as the embedded controller for things because it's cheap and easy to get. And I think if you're talking about a home use, buying a Pi 5 for an emulation box or something like that makes a ton of sense because it probably opens up more potential platforms to run your emulators on than a 3 or a 2 obviously would.
Yeah, that's the last argument I would make for it, is just the community support is very good. I mean, they're well supported by the Pi Foundation in terms of hardware support and stuff. But then, yes, also there's RetroPie and Octoprint and a bajillion things out there that are made to just turnkey install and run on a Pi. So community support, software availability is quite strong there.
I generally but I think to Warbird's point, don't buy more Pi than you need.
No. Or maybe don't buy a Pi at all if you need more than a Pi and there are better options that give you more for not much more money.
The Pi B and Pi A and A plus are all discontinued.
Oh, really?
The Pi 1B plus is still available. That's the 512 meg configuration.
Okay.
And the Pi 4 V1, which is the one that had the bug that it didn't work with a lot of USB cables, is also discontinued. But they manufacture every other Pi they've ever made, other than those 5.
That's impressive. Now you got me wondering. You've got me wondering which version of the Model B I've got here because I'm still running a Model B. It's my NUT server.
I'm uncomfortable talking about your NUT server, Brad.
Well, too late. I need to do some maintenance on that thing. It's
probably fine.
Oh, it's the 512 gig version.
Yeah, 512 megabyte. You mean?
Yes. If I had a Pi Model B with 512 gigabytes of memory, there would be something very strange going on.
Is it the one with the 40 pin GPIO or the 26 pin GPIO? Because the 26 pin 512 megabyte version is not being made anymore, but the 40 pin one is.
Well,
that's the differentiator.
It's hidden behind my desk where I can't.
It has Ethernet. So you're.
Oh yeah, this one does definitely has Ethernet.
Oh no, never mind. That's not a differentiator. Sorry. Anyway,
right. we should move on. We should move on, but I'm going to bellyache about one thing real fast here.
And what you got?
The Pi Foundation provides no upgrade path for the Raspberry Pi OS, which is just Debian with their extra stuff on it to support the hardware on there and stuff. But if you're running, for example, the Debian 11 version of Pi OS, they explicitly say, "Hey, do not do the distro upgrade to 12." It will likely break things. If you want to upgrade major versions of Raspberry Pi OS, you have to wipe the card and reinstall.
I mean, look, wiping the card and putting a new card in every few years, probably not a terrible idea.
I guess so. Also, do I really need to upgrade? Not especially. No.
Also, if you're killing a lot of SD cards on Raspberry Pis, you should not be writing logs to the card. Yes, you got to set them up so that most of the modern Pi distros do this automatically now. So they'll write the log to RAM and then cache it out once or twice a day.
Oh, you mean the turnkey ones?
The turnkey stuff.
Those should, RetroPie. I hope that's the case. Raspberry Pi OS does not though. I'd definitely go get log to RAM, numeral 2 log to RAM. I set that up on all of my Pis, and all those SD cards have been going for years with no problems.
Yeah.
Next question is going to be, as I look for it.
I'm filling time now.
Are you going to sing a ditty?
I don't know. I was thinking about it, but I ran out of words. I'm about to sneeze, I think. So.
Flip triples. Several people have asked this question. I feel like I need to just like state it for the record because people have been curious. Flip triples asks, could we get a post-mortem on Brad's AM5 stability issues that led to him switching platforms to Intel? I always enjoy hearing real-world hardware experiences that can't be captured in day one reviews, and I'm curious if the root cause was identifiable.
Brad, was the root cause identifiable?
Well, Will, I'm glad you asked. Trying to think where to start with this. There were two things here. One of them I think was more broad AM5 stuff, and then one of them was specific to the motherboard I had.
Yeah.
The ongoing problem I had with the Gigabyte motherboard, which was an X670E Aorus. I think people have landed on Aorus as the pronunciation.
Aorus, I believe is the spelling.
Aorus. It was an X670E Aorus Master Gigabyte. It was like a constellation of problems. It was like USB, networking, storage sometimes.
Stuff just dropped off, right?
Randomly vanished. Like I would, and it's hard to define because the behavior was so nebulous and so like varied as it would happen. Like it's kind of hard to put my finger on exactly how it manifested, but it was like you would boot into Windows and like all of a sudden you would have no Bluetooth and your D drive was not showing up.
That seems bad.
You'd be in the middle of something and like all your USB devices would suddenly vanish.
Both of those things seem bad. Or
all the networking would stop. Like both the RJ45 going to the internet and also the Mellanox card, the SFP Plus card that goes straight to my NAS, both of those things would vanish.
Did Gigabyte replace these boards for people, or were they just like everything's cool?
So yeah, like, I saw people out there going like, why didn't you just RMA or whatever? And like, so I spent a ton of time looking at different places that people post about Gigabyte, like their forums or read their subreddits.
Yeah.
There were a bunch of people with this board who were having this problem. So that's the other thing. A bunch of people were having this problem. And quite a few of them had stories about RMAing the board. And they would get a board back that worked. And then several months later, the problems would start again. And that's exactly what happened with me. I built the machine in April. This didn't start until like September. Oof. But once it started, it was persistent enough that I was like, dude, fuck this. Like,
so is there a root cause identified for this problem? Is this a specific board problem, or is this an all AM5 problem?
So like there's a user on our Discord who had the same board and CPU with the exact same problems, who also switched to Intel. Alex Battaglia at Digital Foundry.
Yeah.
Built a I think it was a 7800 X3D system with this board. It was funny. I was on the Full Nerd with him around the time that he built that, and I mentioned to, like, oh man, I hope you don't run into these problems.
Did he have the problems?
Sure enough, like a month or two later, he started tweeting about he was running into the same stuff. I don't know. I didn't see where his issues ended up. I hope he got those fixed. But anyway,
I'll ask him next time he's on the Full Nerd.
It was all the people saying, yes, I RMA'd this, and then the problems just started again. Like I was just like, I am not dealing with this in a machine that needs to do work.
Well, so then why didn't you just keep another AM5 board and switch to a different board?
That was the decision I came down to when I was like, okay, I can't deal with this anymore. I need to do something. The options were stick with AM5, stick with AMD, and just swap a different board in, because that very much seemed to be a Gigabyte specific problem.
Okay.
To be clear, those problems were not, as far as I could tell. I think there might have been another board or two from Gigabyte having similar issues, but I never saw a thing about Asus or MSI or
anyone else.
Yeah, like any of the major. Well, not that there are that many. ASRock, they're not. That's pretty much all of them.
Asus, MSI, and Gigabyte are pretty much the majors at this point. I think.
ASRock, people seem to like. I mean, everybody has up and down periods, but ASRock is actually like very popular in the sort of like budget or hardcore build community right now.
Yeah, no doubt.
But there were other issues I was having with mostly USB compatibility that were more broad AMD related. I use a lot of USB AV stuff.
Yeah.
I've got this Motu, which is a USB audio interface. I've got a little Magewell HDMI capture USB 3 thing that I use to run my camera through. I've got an Astro Mix amp here. All of those had issues on various USB ports on that Gigabyte board. But I gather from talking to people, from looking at feedback out there, that like USB compatibility stuff is just kind of not great on AMD. And I had really hoped that had gotten better with AM5, and I think it got worse instead.
I'm going to say USB compatibility is not great anywhere, but it is, I think, Intel. I have on my machine, on my Intel machine, I have the webcam and the has to be plugged into certain ports, or else it just randomly disconnects and reconnects, which is just like, it's a webcam, man.
Like every motherboard is going to have some of that probably, or every platform is going to have some USB compatibility stuff. But for example, the Motu, I tried basically every port on that board. I could never get usable audio out of the Motu. Like the Motu is primarily an audio in interface for XLR mics, but it also, it has a headphone jack and other ways of monitoring.
Yeah.
Every time I use that thing as the output device in Windows, no matter what port it was on, I tried literally all of them. Garbled, staticky mess coming out of the.
That's so weird because
no matter what I did,
that's my main audio output. Right, the same exact interface. Even
it was super bizarre. There were weird issues around other stuff. Like this Astro Mix amp it exposes two kind of virtual audio output devices to Windows. I mean, they're hardware devices, but you know what I mean. Like it shows up in Windows. It shows up as Astro Mix Amp Pro Game and Pro Voice. Those are two separate outputs, and it's got a little like fader knob on there, or that kind of goes between those two.
Yeah, so you can balance your game and your audio without changing the mix in Windows. Yeah, it's really nice. Super
useful. I put voice on one and game on the other, and then I can just knob that back and forth when I can't hear people talk or whatever. Anyway, like that board had serious issues like using both of those at the same time, like setting different applications to output to different devices. That also was super unreliable. Anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying when it came down to should I try a different AM5 board from another vendor, or should I just get off this platform, I chose the latter. And I will say this Z790 board with this 14900K, basically zero USB compatibility issues of any kind. Like every device I have that I've plugged into any port on this thing has just worked.
Well, there you go.
And like that alone was worth the switch back. I like a lot of what AMD is doing, and I still find their product lineup pretty interesting conceptually.
Yeah.
But problems like that, especially in any kind of work environment, are just a non-starter.
I keep thinking about thread-rippering, but also I just want a computer that works.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you ever watch, I don't know how do you say this guy's handle, Epos Vox? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I'm familiar with the channel, but I don't remember.
He calls himself the stream professor. He does a lot of capture card reviews and like codec quality tests and like hardcore Twitch streaming nerd shit.
Yeah,
that I'm way into. He just ran a video recently where he basically said he's running streaming from Windows in general for audio production, video and audio production, and he went and got a Mac Studio. But what he was running prior to making that choice was a Threadripper. He was trying to do all his audio, his recording and stuff on a Threadripper, and he said he was having so many issues with latency and like buffer underruns causing pops and crackles and stuff that he was just like, and that was a Threadripper. So like I don't know that a Threadripper is great for AV.
Well, I was just say it's funny because I've had a couple of people that do professional audio stuff who've talked to me about switching to Linux lately because they're able to control the drivers that are used and stuff like that at a really high level. And like, because a lot of the drivers are open, they're just able, like people in the community are able to fix latency issues rather than
that's interesting
dealing with shenanigans.
When I was talking to somebody about this whole thing recently, and I jokingly said something about that. Like I jokingly said, like, it's do all your production on Linux, but actually that made me wonder because like there are so many different Linux audio subsystems. Like depending on distro, you can quite literally just decide what the underlying audio system is going to be. Like it used to be also way back when, like Pipewire is what a lot of people use now.
Well, but also like ironically in the era of like live service operating systems, it's also a lot easier to have a stable version of Linux where nothing changes, which is like you think about like the audio machine in your old studios at GameSpot, 15 years ago. And it was probably a Windows XP machine that was unplugged from the internet because they didn't want anything to jack with the settings on it because it was always a problem. So I get it. Anyway. Yeah. Audio sucks. This is the TLDR. It's always hard.
Unless you use a Mac, I guess.
Or Linux, I suppose.
Let's see. I have so many good questions here. Here's a good question. Yeah, it is a good and a good problem to have. I actually pulled this question from like December. I've been meaning to answer it every month and never quite gotten around to it. It's from Horch, I'm going to say, is the pronunciation.
I'll agree with Horch. Horch sounds good.
Do you have any viewpoints on mechanical watches? Could you see yourself moving from the Apple Watch to a mechanical watch? Does the technology of keeping time with only springs, gears, and no batteries interest you, or does it feel redundant now in 2024?
I was given an Omega Speedmaster as a gift a few years ago.
So that sounds like a nice one.
It's the Moon Watch.
Oh, wow.
It's one of those. It's one of the watches that when NASA was like, hey, we need a way to tell time in space.
Right.
They sent a guy with a checkbook or a PO to the like local jeweler and bought one of every watch that was waterproof on the Houston jeweler. And then they ran them through vacuum tests and blasted dust at them and all sorts of stuff. It's there's a book about this whole, like how they spec'd stuff. It talks about like contracting with Playtex to make the spacesuits because the women who had been sewing bras by hand knew how to sew stretchy synthetic fabrics and stuff like that. So I love the Omega. I wear it for special occasions these days, really.
That's a hell of a gift.
It was one of my grandfather collected watches and repaired watches. So he had a large collection of watches that, like, when a thing happened in the late 70s, early 80s when digital watches came to prominence, where a bunch of the old mechanical watches that are now worth a shitload of money, people would just sell them for nothing because they thought they weren't worth anything anymore.
Oh, wow.
And that experience kind of warped his perception of things in a way that was a little damaging, because then he thought the same thing was going to happen with typewriters and a bunch of other things when they got supplanted by digital technology. And it turns out having a giant collection of typewriters in 1992 maybe wasn't great.
Mm-hmm. But it is now, though.
Yeah, but I don't know. They got rid of them all a long time ago, so we were blessedly free of them. They take up a lot more space than watches, it turns out, too. But yeah, so when Mom was clearing out his stuff, she asked which watch I wanted, and I was like, I want a Moon watch, please.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice because it's sentimental as well.
Yeah, it reminds me of my grandfather, which is nice.
Yeah. My feeling, I certainly have great admiration for the mechanical aspect.
Yeah.
Like the fine engineering, I guess, the clockwork precision. And I think they look really cool, but the smartwatch is just so useful. Like, it just performs so many other things that a time only watch would not. It's just too deeply embedded in my lifestyle now.
I will tell you, when the power went out here and we were charging phones in the car and stuff like that for a week during the fires a few years ago, I did dig out the mechanical watch because it was nice to be able to tell time.
Oh, sure.
Because nothing else in our house let us tell time without electricity or turning on a phone.
That's a good point, now that you mention it.
Also, it became clear after a few days that we didn't really need to know what time it was. You just kind of ate when you were hungry and went to sleep when it got dark. So, it worked out.
That worked just fine for millennia, it turns out.
Yeah, I'm with you though, Brad. I think the convenience of, hey, I can do most of my phone stuff from my watch with my voice is pretty nice.
Mm-hmm. I've said it before. I use it for fitness tracking. I use it to buy things when I'm out and didn't bring my wallet because I was exercising and just want to Apple Pay something at the register. I've started using it for, like, when I'm standing there waiting for the water to boil to have coffee in the morning, I'll pull up the news app and just go through the headlines because it's a nice, quick way to see what's going on. You know what I mean? Like,
that's too much. That's one step too far.
It does a lot of things.
Do you have cell service on yours?
No, I don't.
Yeah, and me either.
I just generally, my lifestyle is so at home that I didn't really see a need for it.
I'm surprised. I didn't know that Apple Pay would work without connection. That's interesting.
Yeah, you have to add everything to the wallet a second time. It does not take, for example, credit cards from your Apple Wallet on the phone. I assume the watch has some version of whatever their security chip is this generation.
Yeah, that has the NFC thing. Yeah.
But yeah, you have to add all your payment options separately to the watch. And I guess, I don't know. I guess it's validated once and then they just assume
I assume it has a token just like a card, right?
I guess so.
Because the card doesn't have an internet connection either. Why would you need? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess it's like that.
This all makes sense.
Yes. Okay. Last question here from Erickson. How do you remember shower or driving thoughts? Because most of the times that I'm done with the driving or the shower, the idea is gone with the wind.
Hey, Siri, remind me in 20 minutes of blah, blah, blah. And then I get a message 20 minutes later that's blah, blah, blah.
From the shower?
Yeah. Do you not take your My phone's sitting on the vanity in the bathroom, probably.
What?
Wait, do you not leave your phone in the bathroom when you're showering?
Dude, I barely look at my phone all day. Like half the time, I don't even know what room my phone is in.
Do you have your watch in there?
In the bathroom? In the shower?
What do you don't take it in the shower with you? You take it off when you get in the shower, right?
The watch is also somewhere far from the shower.
Oh my God. Okay. So there's also a Google Home in our bathroom because we needed a thing to have the look when if you don't want to have to stand there and be like, hey, you have to brush your teeth for 2 minutes, you let the machine do that work for you. Okay.
Welcome to the ultra connected home of the future.
Yeah. I mean, the 1,000 square feet of glory, speakers everywhere. Yeah, do you know? I just if I'm in the car, this is mostly a car thing for me. I think
car makes more sense. Of course, your phone's going to be there.
Usually, if I'm in the shower, I have a cigar and a beer. If I'm being honest.
Yeah, now we're talking. I also don't use Hey Siri though, so that wouldn't work for me even if the phone wasn't there.
Well, see, this is your look. Maybe you should answer that question about maybe the Amish had it right.
You know, there might be something to that.
I find the voice stuff to be really useful for this.
Yeah. I totally get how useful it is. Just having a microphone on all the time. I try to not do that with anything.
You could also use the voice recorder.
True. Yeah.
Yeah. You can set that up to be a shortcut. You can literally do that on the watch face and hit have a button that you tap on the watch face that lets you do a voice record anytime you want.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to call it on questions.
Then that'll do it for us this month. Thanks to everybody who sent questions. And we had a bunch of good ones this month.
Yeah. Thank you to all the askers. Like I'm actually bummed we have to stop here because there are a bunch more that I would have read.
But we've got to go dive into hell in a minute. We've got to record a Patreon episode in the next few days, which will, I know what I want to talk about, but as always, thanks to everybody who sent in the questions. Thanks to all of the patrons, everybody who supports the show. Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod is a 100% listener supported show.
True.
So if you would like to find out how to support us and keep the show going, you can go to patreon.com/techpod. Again, that's patreon.com/techpod. And as always, we'd like to thank all of our listeners. Thank you, listeners.
Thank you.
But we want to give a special thank you, since it's the last episode of the month, to our executive producer and associate producer tier patrons. So executives first, thanks to Andrew Slosky, Paddle Creek Games, makers of Fractured Veil, David Allen, James Kamek, Joel Krauska, Jordan Lippett, Just Wedge, Twinkle Twinkie, Yabs, and Pantheon, makers of the HS3 high-speed 3D printer. Also, a special thank you goes out to our associate producer tier patrons, including Alejandro Navarro, Andre M. Burke, Andrew Dicey Shoodice, Arthur Keys, Ben Tallman, Eric Klein, Eric the Fourth, the Cincinnati Eric. That's another new Eric this month, by the way.
The Erics are multiplying.
Look, you put 4 Erics in a room together, all of a sudden you have 16. So Felix Kramer, Graham Banks, Jad Rita, Matt Walker, parentheses Walkman 8080, Nathan Phelps, Sanchit Kumar, Steve Lynn, Thomas Shea, and Tom Hilton. Thank you all so much. We really appreciate you.
Thank you. We certainly do. Just whatever you do, don't get an Eric wet, but especially don't feed an Eric after midnight.
Oh, never after midnight. That'll do it for us this week. Thanks to everybody who sent in questions, and thanks for listening to the show. We will see you all next week.